I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was afraid that if I spoke it, it would breathe more life into it. There was this level of almost hallucination or delusional quality that it felt like if I said anything to anyone, it would be more real, and maybe it'll just go away if I pretend it doesn't exist. Many people describe the beast or this otherly entity.
It was in 1985. I was working in a bar in Daytona Beach. I had gone into the cooler to get some beer, and it hit me. I had no idea what was happening. I thought I had a brain tumor.
Got my first one.
I thought I was dying.
My wife and I sitting in the living room, enjoying an evening. Next thing you know, I'm on the floor in the fetal position. Then it went to slamming my head into the freezer door, trying to make it stop.
Something got in my eye, and it was pushing it out. And I was trying to push it back in. I had no idea what was going on.
I started to complain that I woke up in the middle of the night and my eye hurt. And I was convinced it was my eye, because at that time I was just shy of 7 years old.
So I was about 10 and a half, 11 years old. I can't really remember too many details, but I do remember how much pain I was in.
I had a pain at 1 in the morning that I had never experienced before in my life, and it was one of these pains where like, there's something really, really wrong here. And
I can't even explain to you how, what it felt like, other than something is happening. I'm probably going to die tonight.
A cluster headache attack is something that, unless you've had one, you can't really envision or think about what it feels like. The pain level is higher than anything that you've ever experienced. It's localized behind the eye. You feel like your eyeball is getting pushed out of its socket. And it is a really sharp, stabbing pain. One word that I kind of like to use sometimes is it's an exquisite pain, which really kind of describes how sharp it is to me.
The pain for me is as if someone takes a hot bayonet and sticks it in my eye and into my head like a hot poker and turns it around. There is no escaping that pain. You are screaming, you are pacing, you are wanting to pound your head against the wall, and it is relentless. It does not stop for one heartbeat until it quits or lets down, and that can be 45 minutes or 3 hours and 45 minutes.
It feels like somebody is ripping your eye out and like taking just like a pick, a nice pick, and just really like stabbing it and over and over and over and over and over and over again.
It is like someone has grabbed your eye socket and just grabbed it with a super hot, massive vice grip or gigantic pinchers, and it's just literally grabbed hold of it and is trying to tear it out.
You are on the floor, you are crying for help, and you can't believe that a human can feel this pain. It feels like someone is stabbing you with a knife in your eye over and over again.
I have tried knocking myself out by pounding my head on ceramic tile and floors. And I think that the pain is actually so high that it pushes your body past the level that normally puts a body into shock. I mean, if you're in an accident and you suffer some serious injury, your body usually goes into shock so you don't even feel that pain. I think that this pain is so high that it surpasses that level where your body can't even shut down and put you into shock to avoid it.
You're waking up from a dead sleep, hearing him crying in the shower and banging on the walls, and you hear tiles breaking, and this is like repeatedly all the time.
I just remember being in my room. My room was right next to the bathroom, and whatever. He was just pounding his head against the wall.
I didn't know if it would like give him a heart attack because of all the pain, and I'd hear him crying and moaning and pacing back and forth.
You hear him in the shower pounding on the walls or crying, and I kind of always just kind of tried to separate myself or distract myself. And my mom was really good about kind of keeping us away and kind of almost protecting us from that so we don't see it as much.
I would just say that Dad's having headaches and we just have to try to be quiet, even though he said it doesn't matter. Noise didn't bother him. It's just like he was in his own world and nothing was around except for him and the pain.
In a very brief period, usually preceded by a sense of not necessarily pain, but a certain discomfort behind the eye, as if there's some pressure behind it and some sensation here, but not exactly painful. This is what we call shadows, and within a few minutes that ramps up intensely and very quickly to an explosive pain behind the eye, as if someone behind is trying to push the eyeball out of its socket. It's the best way I can describe it. For me, they last about an hour and 15 minutes if I'm not able to abort the attack. And then within a matter of 5 minutes or less, it's gone from me, and at least that attack is over.
Well, the first 10 years, I would go to the emergency room. I saw several neurologists and did not have much success at all.
Now, I had 2 gamma knife surgeries, which is pinpoint radiation to the trigeminal nerve to try and stop the pain from a cluster headache. They did not work, by the way.
I had teeth pulled.
2 operations where they tried to radio frequency lesion of the trigeminal nerve.
They essentially put these long needles up your nostrils and eject Novocaine into a nerve block back into your head. It was very painful, but I was in the middle of a major episode, and it cured it for 1 day.
Many, many drugs.
We tried lithium.
Lithium.
Lithium, Depakote, antidepressants.
I was on a couple of different anxiety medications.
Topamax,
Verapamil, years of Verapamil.
I was on a very high dosage of prednisone for many years.
Prednisone.
I'll call it the devil's tic tacs, prednisone.
It would stop my attacks, but it ruined my body.
I was on prednisone for maybe 2 to 3 years nonstop. I felt really weak and I just didn't feel like myself.
I went from a size 2 to a size 12.
Some of the meds that I was taking, the triptans, they work great, but as a fireman, you got to be ready to go, and the side effects after an attack and after using the Imitrex, I was pretty shot. I get tired.
Epilepsy medications, we tried everything.
All with very little success.
During the attack, a large percentage of people with cluster headaches, suicide does come into their head as a way to end the pain. They start thinking about not only surviving that one, but knowing that even if they survive that attack, 3 hours later, they're going to be right back at it again.
In 2013, when I actually got pain-free time, all my feelings, all my emotions that were buried for many, many years, they all boiled up. So I ended up putting a gun to my head and pulled the trigger.
I even had one neurologist say to me, well, I came in and I'm not getting better. They tried this and tried that, and it's not being effective. And I went in and he kind of said, well, the only cure is a 357. And I said, 357? And he says, well, you can't cure them. I says, are you saying I should blow my brains out?
I was pulling the hammer back, not realizing I was pulling the trigger, and it jammed on me.
One night I decided I couldn't take it anymore. The pain was just too much because I'd go to emergency and they told me I was seeking drugs. So I loaded the gun and I got on the computer to tell everybody bye. And Eric Diamond, he was on the computer that night and he told me, he says, no, you've done it this long, you can continue. It's not easy.
Suicidal ideation that in my view is less about wanting to kill myself and more about I'll do whatever it takes to stop the pain, even if that's what it takes. I know for me, my experience was I would just be collateral damage. I'd be willing to kill it even if it meant I die with it.
Every man has a breaking point. You don't give up right away, but sooner or later, nobody's going to keep going, and that's the way I look at anyone, especially someone that suffers as much as they do with cluster headaches. If they would decide to take their own life, I would definitely not call it a cowardly deed.
In 1998, I was online talking on this message board. A friend of mine in Scotland came on the board, and he really just kind of asked the question if anybody had ever heard anything about psychedelics being able to treat cluster headaches. And some of the people on the message board wanted to kick him off the message board because talking about Schedule I drugs, and no, we don't supply drugs, go away. And you know, one of the things people with cluster headaches do is if you have one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, you're going to have one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every day until your cycle ends. So when one doesn't happen, you try to figure out what it was that you did differently. And if you had spaghetti the night before, you're going to eat spaghetti for the next 6 weeks, you know, hoping that it happens again. So this guy in Scotland came to the board, and his cycle didn't start that fall that he expected, and he tried to figure out what it was he had done differently. And the only thing he could think of was that he had used LSD recreationally a couple of times during that summer, and then did a little bit of research and found out that when LSD was discovered, it was actually being looked at as a treatment for headaches. At that point, I was actually scheduled to choose between one of 3 surgeries that I was approved for: the gamma knife, which is shooting radiation into the brain; microvascular decompression, which is drilling a hole in the back of your skull and wrapping the nerves with Teflon; and radiofrequency ablation of the trigeminal nerve in my face. So I was trying to decide which one I was going to subject myself to, and a friend of mine on the internet sent me some mushrooms, and I found them sitting on my front porch and decided to give them a try before I decided which one of these surgeries I was going to do. We made tea with the mushrooms, and I drank it, and it was completely different than anything I'd ever tried before. Up to that point, I had tried 70 different medications, and if any of them had any effect at all, I could still feel the pain in the back of the head, feeling like a balloon. And my head cleared like it had been 20 years before that, before my cycle had ever started. So I knew what a profound difference this was, and that's really what started me on the mushroom treatments. There is a grower's guide. It's the Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide. I mean, honestly, it's very simple. It takes you an hour in the kitchen, so if you can bake a cake, you can grow mushrooms.
After the first cluster headache conference, I said, you know what, I need to do this for myself. I was a little skeptical, but you know, a little help with my family. I received some alternative medicine, and you know, they said, if this is gonna help you, then let's try it. So I, one day, just closed my door, watched a funny movie, tried out the alternative medicine, and I couldn't believe, even the next day, that I was pain-free.
My son had a friend whose father wore a lot of Deadhead shirts, so I figured, well, I guess there's maybe a source. My wife talked to him, and he told my wife, yeah, come back in the afternoon, I'll talk to you later. He jumped on the internet and looked everything up. And he was basically in tears for me. And that evening, he gave me a hit of LSD. And I was pain-free for 90 days. 90 days. And then I was back to the emergency rooms. The emergency room said, we haven't seen you for a while. And I said, well, yeah, I took a hit of LSD. And they're like, what? Doesn't make any sense.
When I was first learning about psychedelics and had used them and found out how well they worked with few side effects, all of the research dollars were really going into different forms of medical devices and surgeries. One of the studies that was going on was a thing called deep brain stimulation, which was being used to treat Parkinson's at that point. They were just starting to look at that. And there was a study going on in Germany that included 6 people with cluster headaches. And one of those 6 people actually died from the surgery. And the conclusion after that surgery was that they did see some improvement in some of the people that didn't die, and they thought that more research into deep brain stimulation was warranted, and they were going to continue that surgery and that research. And at that point, I had already known that mushrooms had been used to treat headaches for thousands of years. There was actually written evidence back in the Rig Veda, which is I think 3,000 years old, where people were using mushrooms to treat headache conditions. And I knew a lot of people that were using them to treat their cluster attacks and ending them. And I thought it was terrible that we weren't allowed to research mushrooms, but they were allowed to research putting wires deep into the brains of people that I cared about. So that was really a motivating factor for me for trying to educate people as to the efficacy and the safety of psychedelics, and that research needed to be done, and whether or not it was as good as it seemed to all of us that were using them successfully.
So I finally convinced everybody that it's time to go public and let the public know how we're being mistreated. If the stats from Larry Shore's study don't do it, it's time to handcuff myself to the door. And that will happen in February if we don't get results. So I'll be taking bail money, donations.
Once I got involved with Clusterbusters and met Bob, my life changed dramatically. I know he's not a doctor. I know he's not a politician. I know he's not a therapist. I know he's not a scientist. But in every one of those categories, he pushed those boundaries in every way for all of us.
Bob Wold is the patron saint of cluster headache sufferers. In some ways, for personal reasons, on his own mission, he was someone who tried virtually everything there was, including some horrible, horrible treatments, and nothing worked until he came across psilocybin, which worked for him, and that was the first thing to work for him, and he's made it his life mission to help other cluster headache patients. So I'm not sure when he started this that he had any way of imagining what this would become, but as I understand it, it's the world's largest advocacy group for cluster headache patients.
I've been called a hero. You know, anybody that was down there working on the pile, you know, firemen, police officers, volunteers, everybody down there. Never comfortable with that at all. I was doing my job. Bob, on the other hand, Bob is my hero. He wasn't doing his job. He took the bull by the horns, or the beast by the horns, and he ran with this thing. And he was the only source of information out there for us, you know. So he's my hero, Bob, you know. And my first conference last year, I finally got to meet him, and I couldn't catch my breath. I was starstruck, actually, when I first met him. And now that I've got to know him a little bit better, it's just even better, and I'm just even more amazed at what he does for us. This guy saved my life. I don't know where I would have been if I didn't find him in this group.
It's like finally meeting someone from your own tribe. These are people who understand and know, and people you can talk to about this and don't respond in the ways that other people do. So it's been described as a family reunion or a gathering of the tribe or something like that. And I think there's a tremendously therapeutic quality or value to being with other people who understand what something's like for you that happens to be very isolating.
Anybody that's out there that has cluster headaches and has ever felt alone or had problems getting oxygen or getting medications or just having a million questions and not knowing where to turn, this is the place. These are the people you need to come see, because everybody knows what you're going through, and you'll get so much information here that you won't find anywhere else. And it is absolutely worth the trip. Get out here and get involved. It will change your life for the better.
I try not to give anyone pity that has it. I give them love. Pity is just going to make them feel that they have something that they can never do anything about or with. But you give them love and show them, hey, I've come this for, 41 years and I'm still kicking, and that's what helps.
My hope for the future is that Clusterbusters can keep on growing and being out there to provide support for the cluster community. I don't expect a cure in the very near future, but just keep on growing and helping more people is what we're hoping to do.
It was in 1985. I was working in a
Got
bar
my first
in
one.
Daytona Beach. I had gone into the cooler,
sitting in the living
to
room,
get some beer,
enjoying an evening.
and it hit
Next
me.
thing you know,
I had no idea
I'm
what was
on the
happening.
floor.
I thought I had a brain
Fetal
tumor.
position.
Something got in
I thought I
my
was
eye,
dying.
and it was pushing it
freaking
out.
out.
I didn't know how to handle it.
And I was
went
trying to
to
push it
slamming
back in.
my
I
head
had no
into
idea what
the
was
freezer
going
door,
on.
trying to make it
They
stop.
put me in a
in the middle
hospital
of the
for
night and
several
my eye
days,
hurt.
and then they sent me.
And I was convinced it was my eye, because at that time I was just shy of 7 years
10 and a
old.
half, 11
Woke
years
up in the middle of the
old.
night,
I can't really
screaming,
remember
holding my
too
eye.
many details, but I do remember how much
had
pain I was in.
pain
My
at 1
mom
in the morning
told me to
that I
lie
had never
down in a
experienced
dark
before
room
in my life.
and, you know, maybe use some Tylenol.
Where, like,
A few
there's
months
something
later,
really, really wrong.
I got it again.
It was 1 a.m.
Started
I was at
becoming
work. Basically, I just ran past the officer and told him,
So,
I got to go into something
I
really
get,
wrong with my head. And
first thing
jumped
is
into my
the
car
deadline.
and I
The
drove to
headache finally passed. I was exhausted. So that's what I remember, just intense.
We got another doctor, and he says, "Oh, you have this pain. That's how that started." He gave me a nerve block. 2 days later, I went home.
By myself.
You know, 'cause I didn't have to go
What to do other than if something was happening, I knew that I had
And it's certainly been hot, molten rod, steel rammed right into your eye.
what it felt like other than something is happening, I'm probably going to die tonight.